Hey there, historians, Brian here. Picture, if you will, one of the most powerful countries in the world, say the United States. Congress, the legislative body, decides that the president must be replaced, so they contact a foreign country, and a rival at that, and ask them to bring an army to the U.S., remove the president, and install their leader as the president of the United States.
Say what?
It sounds a bit crazy because it is a bit crazy, and yet that's what happened in 17th century England. How? Why? You'll find out today. Our essential questions are: why was England concerned about the prospect of having a Catholic monarch? What was the Glorious Revolution? And how did the English Bill of Rights influence the Constitution of the United States and other legal codes? Here we go. England had just been rocked by a civil war, well, 3 civil wars, and a Puritan military dictatorship under Oliver Cromwell. When he died in 1658, the government collapsed. The people were over the dictatorship, sick of war, sick of military rule, sick of not being allowed to dance. In 1660, Parliament invited the son of the beheaded Charles I to assume the throne. Charles II was welcomed enthusiastically by the public, and Parliament voted to recognize him as the rightful monarch through the interregnum, or between reigns period of 1649 to 1660. Charles' ascension to the throne began the Restoration period. While there was some ambiguity regarding his religion, we'll get there later, one thing he was not was a Puritan. Quite the opposite. The king was known as the Merry Monarch for his outgoing personality as well as his hedonistic behavior. He had 12 children with 7 women, none of them being his wife, making all of them illegitimate and unable to inherit the throne. Charles was a Protestant, and remember, England was a Protestant country, with the official church being the Church of England, also known as the Anglican Church. However, in 1670, he made an alliance with King Louis XIV of France, with a secret condition that Charles would, at some point, convert to Catholicism. It became apparent that Charles would not produce a legitimate male heir, and his Catholic brother James was next in line for the throne, which many English were not too thrilled about. Thus, 2 rival groups emerged in Parliament, England's first political parties. No, not like Merry Monarch parties. The Whigs supported parliamentary power and opposed James as the next ruler. The Tories were pro-crown and supported him. The Merry Monarch passed away in 1685 without an heir, converting to Catholicism on his deathbed. The Tories got their way, with James succeeding his older brother on the throne. Now take a minute to reflect on this question. Why do you think that having a Catholic monarch was such a big deal to some in England? First of all, the idea of freedom of religion as a basic human right was uncommon at the time. But also, remember that the monarch became the leader of the Church of England, so a Catholic king would be able to influence a Protestant church's traditions and practices. Before moving on, we should add that a pivotal piece of legislation was passed during Charles' reign, the Habeas Corpus Act of 1679, making unlawful imprisonment illegal. The act was a key step toward ensuring the fundamental rights of humans and limiting the power of the monarchs, who historically could imprison people who opposed them. While Charles leaned Catholic and believed in divine right, he was too preoccupied with wine and the company of women who were not his wife to make a big deal about either. His brother, well, he was the Anglican Church and Parliament's worst nightmare. James II took the throne in 1685. Fueled by his belief in the divine right, James violated English law by appointing Catholics to high offices and replacing Protestants with Catholics. In 1687, he issued the Declaration of Indulgence, which stated that he would ignore restrictions placed on non-members of the Church of England, and demanded it to be read at Anglican masses. In a way, it was a step towards freedom of worship, but it wasn't too popular at the time. Finally, James centralized the royal government and doubled the size of the standing army, both absolutist moves. When he had a son in 1688, it was the last straw. England faced the possibility of not just one Catholic ruler, but a Catholic dynasty. Take a look at this image. Examine the people, their actions and expressions, even the clothing and furniture, and note the title of the picture. It's called The Revolution, 1688. Describe what you think is happening. Try to make some educated guesses beyond the obvious. We'll get back to the image soon. In 1688, Parliament did something rather unprecedented. James' daughter from his first marriage, Mary, was a Protestant and married to William of Orange, a Dutch political leader and also a staunch Protestant. So Parliament invited William and Mary to invade England and overthrow James. Seriously. This move ticked all the boxes. It eliminated Catholicism from the monarchy while maintaining royal lineage through Mary. William brought 15,000 soldiers to England, and James fled to France with little resistance, thus completing the Glorious Revolution. William III and Mary II became co-monarchs of England, with a caveat. They had to accept and sign a Declaration of Right, later called the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights of 1689 stipulated that monarchs could not do any of the following: suspend laws of Parliament, impose taxes without parliamentary approval, block freedom of speech in Parliament, and penalize citizens over petitions made of the king, reinforcing habeas corpus. Previously, Parliament was called and dissolved at the monarch's whim. That was no longer the case. Parliament would meet regularly. So Parliament told the monarch what they could and couldn't do. England was becoming a constitutional monarchy with laws limiting royal power. Let's revisit our image. You may have noticed that two monarchs are being crowned. Did you see that William and Mary are seated together in identical chairs? This is a unique arrangement for the English monarchy. Compare that with the coronation of James II, who was also married at the time, but is crowned alone. And do you see how in the coronation of William and Mary, it's quite an intimate scene, with people gathered around? Whereas in the coronation of James, most, except for the few involved in the ceremony, are quite distant and removed from the scene. This gives us a clue that the English people view William and Mary as close and approachable, while James is distant and untouchable. Do you see the man reading off a rather long sheet of paper? That could very well be the Declaration of Right. Digging a bit deeper, note that the people dressed with stripes on their sleeves are lawyers, while the people in lacy gowns are members of the church. So you have multiple branches of leadership represented in the coronation, a sign that there is common support for this arrangement. And how about the title, The Revolution? You don't see too many coronations that coincide with a revolution, but by now you know the story. A more immediate impact of the revolution was a shift in power in Europe. Charles and James had forged alliances with Louis XIV. William of Orange and the Dutch were rivals with France, so European power shifted from an Anglo-French alliance to an Anglo-Dutch alliance. Next, with William and Mary's agreement to limit their own power, they became subject to the law and England became a constitutional monarchy. The term constitutionalism is used to describe a government in which the power of a ruler or legislative body is limited by a set of laws. That set of laws being the Constitution. Nowadays, Great Britain still has a monarch. However, the position is primarily ceremonial and Parliament, led by the Prime Minister, make decisions for the country. This modern arrangement is a direct result of the Glorious Revolution of 1688. Many ideas of the Glorious Revolution found their way into the law codes of the United States and other countries and are still in use today. namely free elections, free speech, and the elimination of frivolous imprisonment and cruel and unusual punishment. The broader impact of the shift to constitutionalism is felt worldwide. Today, constitutions and the rule of law limit abuses of power by government officials and preserve civil liberties for the people. Protections in the judicial system ensure fair trials. Freedom of speech and the press are maintained, and today, freedom of religion is also commonly found in modern constitutions, a notable step forward from 1689. As constitutionalism limits the power of rulers, it often goes hand in hand with democracy, or rule by the people, a form of government favored by 78% of individuals polled by the Pew Research Center in a global survey. The Economist's Democracy Index states that about 45% of the world's countries today are truly democratic, with the rest having at least some elements of authoritarianism. According to Freedom House, 80% of the world's population lives in countries rated partly free or not free. However, nearly every country has a constitution, but modern authoritarians shape it to suit their purposes or ignore it. While the English world grappled with the debate of absolutism versus constitutionalism in the 17th century, it remains an ongoing struggle for many. And that brings us to a final question. What obstacles stand in the way of achieving worldwide democracy? As we move forward, we'll be taking a close look at the Enlightenment, the intellectual movement at the root of constitutionalism that would soon inspire a wave of democratic revolutions all over the world. Because, as you know, history is everywhere. Hey, hey.